Welcome to the Sanity Pulpit, and I am Philip J. Bradbury, and I'd like to talk about the worst virus there ever has been and ever probably will be in the planet. It's the ALG virus that most scientists have yet to find a cure for or even a source of. And before I get on to the ALG virus, I'd just like to talk about viruses in general um, and go back to 1999 when I was in South Africa talking as an international AIDS conference and was also co-facilitating AIDS workshops in the big Karoo. Karoo is also for desert, so out in the desert, if you like, kind of northwest of Port Elizabeth. And so we were running these workshops in the townships. Townships, I think, is where black people live, and towns is where white people live. I think that's how it works over there. And so these were small towns, rural towns, with majority of black people. And so we would go into each of these towns and set up and run workshops to educate people on the virus and on sexual issues, which is all connected. Now, there's two things about viruses that I'd like to just. I mean, I learned a lot, but I had worked with AIDS people in New Zealand at a hospice. So we had, as a group, had learned an awful lot about viruses, and the rest of them were more knowledgeable than me. But two things I'd like to just explain about viruses. First of all, the AIDS one was developed by, they discovered a virus in the simian monkey. And this was not by chance. They actually went out searching for viruses and felt that the simian monkey genes were the most similar of all animals to the human. So they took the virus from the simian monkey, took it into the labs in the United States, and tried to make it more virulent, more, how do you say, catchable, and more fatal, more likely to kill you. So they worked on the potency of the virus. So a virus has two characteristics. One is its virulence, i.e., how easy is it to be caught, and secondly is its potency, i.e., what damage does it do? Is it just like a common cold, or is it just going to kill you? So at the time, the story was that AIDS was fatal, and we've since discovered it's absolutely not. So, and the same thing has now happened with the COVID virus. They found a virus in their searching in Wuhan with a bat that lived in the caves in the outskirts of Wuhan, took the virus and developed it in the laboratories in Wuhan and financed by the Americans, by the National Health Institute and by WHO. And so we have the COVID virus, which was a natural virus for a particular species and has been taken and, if you like, zoomed up, souped up for us humans to, let's say, population control, which is Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci's big thing. They want population controlled at 50 billion people on the planet. I think some number anyway. They have said that we should not have any more than that, and so they've developed all these different viruses to reduce or to maintain the human population. So that's one part of viruses. The other thing that we found very interesting is that there are some in South Africa, in out in the rural areas, if you like, these small towns or townships as they call them, is that some towns had AIDS. No, all towns had AIDS, shall I say. Some were getting over it, and some it was getting worse. Now, at the time, this was 1999, they estimated that 66% of South Africans had AIDS. Of those who had AIDS, 60% were women. So in America, it was basically a male homosexual disease, if you like. Most of the people who got it in America and other Western countries were males. In South Africa, it was the women who got it most. And what we discovered was there were some towns where AIDS was prevalent, AIDS was existing, if you like, but it was decreasing. There were other towns, and they might only be excuse me, 10 miles away, 5 miles away. Other towns, AIDS was getting worse and rampant and huge increase all the time. There was no let up. What we found, and this is purely empirical, and all science is empirical, let's not pretend that any of it is scientific. What we found invariably was the towns that had out of control AIDS were the towns where, because we would go into the councils and we need to set up our workshops and ask permission if we could, because in the closer community, in the if you like, the black community, one did not talk about sex. There was no sex education, and even between couples, sex was not discussed. It was a taboo subject. So it was a very sensitive topic, even just talking about sex, let alone AIDS, which was even more not talked about, taboo. So we needed to get permission. So some of the councils we found denied that they had AIDS. They had all of the other things and every other sort of malaise that came with AIDS. In fact, AIDS did not kill anybody. It was the other problems around it that did the damage. So the ones who denied they had AIDS had AIDS. The ones who accepted and they said, yes, we have AIDS and we're going to deal with it, and thank you, please come and help. The ones who accepted they had AIDS and were open to the fact that it was existing and wanted to do something about it were the ones where AIDS was decreasing. And there seems to be, the pattern was absolutely inviolate. There was no exceptions. Where there was denial, there was increase. Where there was acceptance, there was decrease. And that is the same in our lives. If you do the 12-step program for any addiction, the first thing you do when you walk in, hello, you say your name, I'm Philip, and I'm an alcoholic. Admitting that we have the problem is the first step in dealing with the problem. And so this was so obvious when we went into these communities. And so now that I wanted to talk about this other ALG virus, which nobody has talked about, but it's there and it will never be dealt with until we do start talking about it. The ALG virus has infected humans forever. And because we have never talked about it, it's not getting better. And the ALG virus is the always looking good virus. It is the need for humans to always look good in the eyes of the world, in the eyes of ourselves even. Even when we're going somewhere where there's no other people, we might spend some time choosing clothes because we want to make sure that we look good to ourselves. So looking good is one of the most prevalent drivers of our behavior. And it's the most prevalent drivers of our civilization. And I remember there was an American woman who married an Englishman back in, I'm not sure when, the turn of the last century, Nancy Astor. She was a famous, very fearless woman who became an MP in England. And when she first became an MP, a reporter rushed up to her. She had a portfolio, and he asked her a question about her portfolio, some particular detailed, complicated question. And she didn't know the answer. And she said so. She said, I don't know. She said, I'm not an instant politician, but I will find out. That is the opposite of ALG. Because nowadays, every politician, every scientist, every one of us on Facebook and wherever, we are experts. And we're not going to back down and admit that we don't know, because that's not looking good. And we've got the situation now where it is starting to appear that the COVID virus, or our reaction to the COVID virus, particularly in countries like New Zealand, where they have gone absolutely overboard, probably ruined the finance of the nation and the millions of people's livelihoods for generations to come. was done without any consultation, without much investigation, and totally unjustified, because those who have taken the most stringent actions, New Zealand, and those who have taken moderate action, Australia, and those who have taken no action, Sweden, are coming out with exactly the same infection rates and exactly the same death rates. And so the action that people have taken has nothing to do with the resulting result of the COVID virus. The separation, the isolation, the whole drama around it was so ill-informed, so hastily hatched, so badly not thought out. Advice from people who do not know. And because these people are infected with the ALG virus, these scientists, they are never going to admit they don't know, because that is not looking good. And so we have all these experts. Every one of us, I'm included at times, I've come up with these wonderful, what seem to be amazingly right theories about this virus and about everything else, about life. But the fact is, I know nothing. And the older I get, the nothing grows. In fact, there's been an increase in the number of things I know nothing about, an alarming increase, in fact. But we will not admit to ourselves we don't know anything. And I'm thinking, for example, we've got Jacinda Ardern, who has taken extreme action in New Zealand. And now that it's appearing that that action was absolutely not required, unjustified, there was no research done. It was done in an absolute panic, and it has wreaked havoc on the country and on most of the people. And now we have the police knocking on people's doors in New Zealand when people stand up against Jacinda, when they say something on Facebook. She has been promoted to the level of sainthood, and one must not talk about her unless in glowing terms. And I'm wondering if people like her and the Australian Prime Minister, all of those leaders in countries where they have taken drastic financial and security action against the citizens, when they discover that they were wrong, which undoubtedly I'm guessing, but given the current evidence, and I know that I don't know, but there is a mounting evidence that all of that action is wrong, will any of them stand up and say, I'm sorry? Because that would be not looking good. And when we stop being able to apologise, to humble ourselves and say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, the virus will only keep going, as it did in South Africa. When we deny the virus, when we deny that we are about looking good rather than doing good, the virus will continue. And so what we do on Facebook, we put on all the nice things that are happening to us and all the happy things, and when there's nothing happening, nothing constructive going on in our lives, we'll just put up some meaningless other people's stuff, funny little quotes and things, and they lift us in a moment. But we need to remember that it's actually okay to not know. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to make a mistake. And I don't know where this comes from. Again, I do not know. But I suspect there is a very strong influence from the schooling system and from our upbringing. Because in the schooling system, it's all about being right and wrong. You either got it right, well done, therefore you'll get success and happiness. You got it wrong, and therefore you're a failure. And there is very little opportunity for people to experiment and get things wrong. For example, obviously when I was young, that was like 300 years ago, we didn't have all this health and safety. We had to figure things out for ourselves. And we fell off horses and we dived into rivers that, there were logs in there, and whoops, shouldn't have done that. But there was nobody that I knew growing up drowned. Nobody died. And yet nowadays we have swimming pools with fences around them, right next to rivers which don't have fences around them. Their logic is just mad. but we are trying to save ourselves from ourselves because we're terrified of making a mistake. And making a mistake is not looking good. The worst thing that can happen is to make a mistake in this world. And to have to, if you like, Nancy Astor said, I do not know. Well, I have never heard a politician in the last 50 years say, I do not know. They come up with all of these, they're sound bites, aren't they, nowadays? They have these sound bites and they're primed. They're trained in, they're given questions and they have to answer them in front of their mentors or their trainers. And so by the time they get to the TV, they're ready with an answer. That means nothing and they don't know. But they prevaricate and they talk around the subject and they don't answer the question and they say, what a very good question, and all of that sort of stuff. And by the time, the stupid interviewer thinks they have interviewed them, but we've got no information. It's not about information. It's about looking good. The greatest virus, the most virulent, the most vicious virus that we have. And when people make mistakes, which we invariably do, every one of us, if we don't make mistakes, we're not living. We're not experimenting with life. We're not trying things out. And if we can approach life with an exploration, we're not doing it to get it right. We're doing it to find something out. This morning I went for another bike. I go for a bike ride most days, a push bike, and I got lost. But I love it. I mean, I know where I am generally. I'm sort of somewhere in Australia, and if I keep going around in circles, I'll find my way out. And if I follow the sun, there's no rivers, so I can't. In New Zealand, if you get lost, you simply go downhill, find a river, and go out. And in New Zealand, you're always within 2 days of the sea. Here, we don't have rivers; it's dry. But it's fun. I got lost, I think, 3 times today. But where the heck am I? How did I? I wasn't here yesterday. I'm sure I came. No, okay, it's fine. And let us try and look at life that way. That it's an exploration. And there's all of these earnest people on Facebook being right, and I'm one of them. I've been right, i.e., I have been wrong, and got into a tense moment with somebody else on Facebook, and then I think, what an idiot! Why? I don't know the answer. I was expounding a theory because everything is a theory. There are no facts on this planet. There are no facts. The world is flat, then it's round. Who knows? In a few years' time, it might be a pyramid. We might find that we're in a floating triangle. Who knows? Nobody's thought about it. So because they haven't thought about it, it doesn't exist in the world. If someone thinks about it, it might exist. So at the moment, we have this wonderful opportunity to stop being right, to stop always looking good, to divest ourselves of this virus that drives our every moment. And the cosmetics industry, the clothing industry, the car industry, so much of them are driven by always looking good. We need to have the best car and the nicest clothes and the right house and the right this and the right that, the right speech, say the right things. Everything has to be appropriate. Let us start being inappropriate. Not rude, not vicious, not nasty, but let us start just with ourselves, start thinking, well, maybe I don't know. And maybe I can find out. See, part of learning is simply doing and going, oh no, that's not the right way, I'll try it again. See, some people, there is a theory that there are 7 ways of learning, and different people do it different ways. Some like to sneak off into their little cave and think about things and cogitate, and that's how they come up with realizations, if you like. Other people are social. They discover themselves or discover their truth through talking with people. Other people need to do physical things, and that's prevalent in teenage boys. They like to do stuff. They like to get their hands dirty and pull motors apart and get physical. And so that's another way of learning. And some people learn by speaking. They say it, and then they go, oh, okay, no, that's not right. Well, part of it is right and part of it's not. So that is another aspect of learning. And if we deny that, if we only allow people to speak when they think they're absolutely right, they will never be right. If we allow people to experience life, to make the mistakes, verbally, physically, whatever, relationshiply, financially, whatever, locationally, we won't know until we do, until we speak, until we express ourselves in some way. And they talk about Pele, who was one of the most successful soccer players in the world. He apparently scored more goals than most others. I don't think his record stands, but at the time, yes, he was the most prevalent. He also missed more goals than anybody else. That is a fact. Was it no Don Bradman who got more wickets in Australian cricket? I think. Sorry, more runs. He was also run out more than anyone. So we have to make the mistakes to make the successes, and that is how it happens. And it's okay not to look good. It's okay to stuff up. It's okay to say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, you were right in this moment, and just, it's okay, let us move forward. So I invite you just to, instead of making life getting it right, let's just play with it, have it, get it fun, get it an exploration, and let us acknowledge, simply acknowledge how driven we are by always looking good. And once we could acknowledge that we are that way, we can then lose it. We can, if you like, vaccinate ourselves against the virus, the ALG virus, and cure ourselves and just make fools of ourselves. And then who knows what we could discover. Worlds that we have never thought about may arise in the fun of discovery and the fun of not looking good and the fun of just being and allowing others to make mistakes as well. But mainly be nice to ourselves and allow ourselves to make mistakes. So I wish you well, I bless you, and thank you for listening.